Hello, Abnormal Family. Good to see y'all. I want to thank y'all for the continued support for Hunter. Every time we hear something about Hunter or, see the hearts and everything, it just melts our hearts. I am a 16-year-old boy who lives in the Great Plains of Texas, and where I'm from, we've got a lot of agriculture and ghost towns in our area. I hope, Mike, that this story will help somebody. I was on crutches because I had hurt my knee during football season. This experience happened when me and my family had gone out for a drive out to one of our local cities. It's about 10 p.m. My sister was hungry, so we had gotten some McDonald's. I ordered a double quarter pounder. To explain why I had gotten such a meal was because I was hungry and hadn't eaten supper, and I have a fast metabolism. I could have eaten 3 more of those. After we had eaten, my sister had talked to us about a ghost town around the area. I'm not one for scary movies, so I think you get my guess to my response. My brother was all in. We'll call him R. My sister A, and my mother T, and my father J. J didn't think that we could go out into nowhere this late. R tried to get him to change his mind. R ended up successful. The town was about 30 minutes from where we were, and it was quite a drive. The funniest thing was that we were listening to Katy Perry, Eminem, Skillet, and Peyton Parrish on the way there. When we arrived, we had remembered that A had talked about a school that her and her boyfriend had gone to a couple of months ago, so we ended up going to check it out. When we got to the school, there were new windows in store, and a camera that had been recording the whole time. You see, the town was used to having people come and steal some things, so I could see why they had cameras up. T had told my dad to get out before they could see our license plate. I reassure you that we did not come to steal anything. After we had checked the little town out, we had started to head out. Right at the end of the road was a little house that we had not noticed coming in, so we had to stop and check it out. The house had looked like no one had been there in years. Everything was torn down and everything was rusty. It was just obvious that no one had lived there. It was abandoned. To remind you, I didn't get out of the truck because I was on crutches at the time. T, A, and R had gotten out of the truck to go to investigate. When me and J had pulled a little closer to the entrance, I had gotten a sense of unease and dread. It felt like someone was watching me. In particular, I had looked into the door, and I could see a white figure standing at the doorway just staring at me. I had asked my dad if he could see something in the door just to make sure I wasn't seeing stuff. He didn't hear me because he was focused on putting on the hazards. So, I just rubbed it off. About 4 to 5 minutes later, my brother comes running and opens the door that I was sitting on. I almost fell out. What happened? What's wrong? He had such a pale face, like he had seen a ghost. Right when he runs to the other side, I look right back at the doorway to see the thing with its mouth wide open, like it was smiling at me. Its grin was at least ear to ear. I look back at my mother and sister, and they are running back right behind R. My mother had her phone in her hand, and in her other hand she was running with her hands so clenched I could tell that my mom was so frightened. I knew that something was up. My father and I started blaring questions at my mother and sister, those 3 that just hopped right back into the truck. They had no response. They couldn't talk. They just sat there in shock. It was chaos. I had to scream and say, one at a time. They all hush, and my mother goes first and explains. We had to walk a whole football field to get to the house and to see what was over there. My sister then starts. Just about 3 minutes after we had gotten to the house, Mom had went around the house just to check things out. I asked Mom if they had gotten into the house. She said, your sister tried. She just barely touched the window, and the window crashed in. Just barely touched it. Well, the house would have been old if the window crashed in. That's probably why. The truck goes silent. To me, the voice sounded like, you, babe. My mother says to my dad, I thought it sounded like my boyfriend, A said. The voice had sounded real monotone. And said, if you don't leave, we're calling the sheriff. If you don't leave, we're calling the sheriff. It had sounded very evil, R said. I had then remembered the figure that I had seen in the doorway, and mentioned it. My mother had then said that it would have been a skinwalker or wendigo that we had seen. I explained the figure that they stopped in disbelief. While we were on our way home, my mother could not talk. I could tell that she was very terrified. She had sweat on her forehead. Her shirt was even sweaty. My sister, she just shook. I knew that something was wrong, and I heard her tell my dad, "There's something I need to tell you." And he says, "Go ahead and tell me, it's okay." And she says, "I don't think the kids need to hear this." He again told her, "Tell me, it's okay." She told me when they got to the house, they heard my father and I inside of the house, telling them to come on in. They said they knew that it couldn't be us because I was on crutches and there's no way I could have beat them there. But they kept hearing our voices inside the house saying, "Come on in." Whenever she walked to the door and went to open the door, my mom said she reached for the door handle and even heard the door unlock. And whenever she turned the door, she heard the giggle. A giggle of my little sister that was 5 years old that had passed away 2 years earlier. And she hollered, "Mommy, I've been missing you." That's when they turned and ran for the truck. She said she could hear the little girl yelling, "Mommy, don't leave me," as we ran away. "Don't leave me again like you did." My mom still to this day cannot hardly talk about it. She sometimes sits and cries because she says the voice was perfect. Don't go looking for things that you don't want to find, because that day we found something we wish we would have never found, and my mom wishes she would have never heard. Wow, guys, that is a wild one. Definitely something demonic. I would suggest cleansing your house, making sure nothing followed you home. Whatever this was familiar with you guys. It knows your past. And I would just make very sure that you don't have an attachment or something that followed you home. I want to thank you guys for listening. That was a scary one to me. And we'll see you on the next one.